everyone, my name's Anelise. Welcome back to my channel. Like many other people in my generation, I've struggled to find meaning and purpose in daily existence and life. And these years of struggle and searching in my teens and early 20s have led me to join the Orthodox Christian church. So today I wanted to share a little bit more about that journey, how exactly I came here, what brought me, and why I love it so much. So I grew up in a relatively non-religious background. I was baptized Catholic as an infant, and that was basically the end of it. I remember going to like a Christmas service a handful of times throughout my childhood, Easter services here and there as well, but there was no consistent messaging in my family culture surrounding God or what we really believe. I personally have always been a very spiritual person. Even without any sort of structure or guidance in that way, I always felt a connection to something bigger than me and a sense that there was a ruling force that governed this world. Now, parts of my family were Christian, parts were kind of more new age spiritual, and then there were parts that were very like atheistic, academic, that whole world. But growing up, I actually did have some extended family that was Orthodox Christian, and despite all of the chaos in our family, divorce, blended family situations and all that, their home life was so incredibly peaceful. And if you know anything about Orthodox people and the Orthodox Christian life, everybody has like a little prayer corner in their house, and they have icons of Christ and Mary and various saints in that corner. So growing up, when I would go over to their house, I would see their icon wall, their prayer corner, and I would see how their family operated with so much peace and so much love. And I don't know, I'm sure they talked about it some, but it kind of felt more intuitive putting it together that the reason why there was that peace and love and just harmoniousness in their home was because of the Orthodox Christian faith. So I was very vaguely aware of Orthodoxy for the majority of my life, and I was always curious as well, but I never totally had the audacity to actually go and visit the church for myself. That is until I started seeing it show up more and more online. There were a couple things in particular that really kind of got me over the hump of my own hesitation and compelled me to finally go check the church out. So one of those things was this debate. I will link it down below, but it was between Cliff Nechtel, or I don't know how to say his name, but he is a Protestant person who goes to college campuses and like debates people and tries to bring people into the Protestant faith. And he and his son do that together, his son Stuart. But they were hosting a debate at a college. An Orthodox Christian came up and debated them, and he absolutely bodied them. But that was really interesting to watch because Cliff and Stuart were so woefully ill-equipped to even address the concerns or the subjects or the framework that the Orthodox person was operating from. They had like no real understanding of what Orthodox Christianity really is, what they really believe. They sort of just lumped it in with Catholicism, which is really not accurate. That really sparked my curiosity because it showed that Orthodoxy was very distinct from anything in the Protestant world and also anything in the Catholic world. And on top of that, there is a woman that I follow on Instagram. Her username is Bauhauswife. Again, I will link her down below. She is an advocate for home birth, free birth, wild pregnancy, all of those things. And that's why I always followed her as like a very crunchy type of person. Her content always really interested me. And not too long after I started following her, she started talking about her own interest in Orthodox Christianity. And this all came at a perfect season of my life because when I met my husband, Charles, and we started dating, we also started attending church together. He had been going to the same Protestant church for the majority of his life. I became a member of his church. We got engaged, and then after about a year of attending, a few months before our wedding, I asked Charles if he'd be willing to go to an Orthodox church service with me. They have services on Sunday mornings, but they also do evening services on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I asked if he'd be willing to go to one of those evening services, and he said yes. It's really fascinating for me because growing up non-religious, you really miss out on all of these like interdenominational beefs and specificities and all of the intricacies of different denominational theology. And one thing that I did not know was an issue is that Protestants really do not believe in depicting Jesus, like any depiction of Jesus, a painting, whatever. They disagree with that. So they don't do that at all. Catholic and Orthodox churches do. And when we walked into the Orthodox church for the first time, there are just paintings. They're called icons. There are icons on every surface, wall and ceiling, depicting different saints and depicting different scenes from the Bible and depicting Jesus in human form. So my husband, being raised in a very strong Protestant background, was understandably apprehensive about seeing all of this. I was just over the moon to finally be exploring this church that I had been curious about for so long. And I figured that it would take some time for my husband to come around, and I wasn't worried about that. I was telling myself that my 10-year plan was to transition into Orthodoxy because I didn't want to put any pressure on my husband, and I honestly wanted it to be his idea. You know, I really trust his judgment, and I didn't want him to feel like I was wearing him down and trying to force him into something that he didn't want to do. So I was prepared for it to be a long while before he was interested in committing to it. But as it turns out, he came around very quickly. It helps that our church has this phenomenal choir, and the hymns that they sing, they are just so deeply touching. It literally feels like you are in heaven. We also had a very encouraging conversation early on with my uncle, who had already been attending the Orthodox Church for decades at that point. And before I knew it, after only a few months, Charlie was all in, ready to become members and transition into the Orthodox Church. That was so exciting, but we actually had one big problem, which is that we had booked our entire wedding and everything at the Protestant church that we had been attending. It was only a couple months away. So we decided to wait it out. We kept attending on Sundays at the Protestant church for the most part. We had our wedding there. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. Our pastor married us. He filled out our marriage license and he sent it off. We went off on our honeymoon. We had an amazing time up in the Rocky Mountains. And then the Sunday after we got back from our honeymoon, we went to our last service at that Protestant church and we told them that we would not be returning. For me, this was not too difficult. I'd been going for a year or two at this point, and you know, I was so grateful for the community and everything that they had done for us and the relationships that we had built. But I could just tell that we had kind of reached a threshold, especially Charles, where like there was no more growth to be had there, if that makes sense. It was just kind of becoming this monotonous, you know, attend church every Sunday, try to sit through the service. It's very dry. Go to lunch. It was a very, very small church community. But for Charles, obviously, it was a lot more difficult. He had lifelong relationships with the people there, and this community was pretty small. So everybody knew each other very intimately. It's not like you could just fly under the radar if you stopped attending or whatever. People would notice. We told the pastor, it was a very emotional conversation, and he was very, very against our decision to move into the Orthodox Church. It was actually like a very dramatic conversation. Again, not something I was expecting because I had no idea that there were all of these disagreements between different Christian faiths, but we did it. And after that conversation, we never looked back. We started attending all of the services that we could at the Orthodox Church. We met with the priest and had conversations with him, and we started attending the catechism classes that they had. Catechism is basically a briefing on what the faith is, and it's kind of like a training almost, just to help you get a baseline understanding of what they actually believe, how everything works, and what you can expect. So at that point, we were formally received into the Orthodox Church, and we became what is called catechumens. So being a catechumen is a period before you are baptized into the Orthodox Church, before you can receive communion or any of the sacraments, where you're being trained and taught. And as far as I understand it, the point is for you to show up consistently and make it known that being Orthodox is something that you really want. It's such an unimaginably beautiful faith, and it's known as the Apostolic Church. So it is the church founded by the apostles with all of the traditions and beliefs and theology completely intact. And it's so fascinating because even though I was never particularly religious, I've had to unlearn so much about what being a Christian means and what the Christian faith actually is, like what they actually believe, what we actually believe. Because here in the West, whether Catholic or Protestant, there are so many things that are kind of distorted in the way that we view Christianity and Jesus. And I would not consider myself particularly equipped to speak on this. I have a very rudimentary understanding of everything. I'm still very much learning as I go. But the primary thing that I've had to unlearn, and my husband as well, is this concept of God as being vengeful. I'll find some articles or different readings to link down below that explain this concept a little better. It's kind of known in the West as substitutionary atonement, basically that Jesus paid the price for your sins. It's kind of like a judicial explanation of the gospel of like God had to punish someone, and instead of punishing humanity for all the wrong that they did, he punished his son, or he gave that punishment for humanity to his son. And that's really not the Orthodox view at all. There's actually a really great video that kind of explains this that I will link down below. But the Orthodox understanding, the Orthodox knowing is way more beautiful than any other perspective on the gospel that I've ever learned about. And that makes sense. It's cool because it is the gospel. And it just feels so good to be learning and growing and to be challenged in faith and to have to actually participate. That's another thing that's very different, is that the Orthodox faith emphasizes the conscious participation of humanity in their own salvation. And again, this is not something that I'm qualified to speak on. Nevertheless, that is something that really has attracted me, to feel like there is work to be done and growth to be had and progress and participation. And that's very different from my experience in the Protestant church, which was much more passive. It's very much like beating a dead horse, the same message over and over, and then but with nothing really actionable. For me as a human person who has will and a body and I'm like made for action, you know, I'm made to do things in this world. So it has just been so beautiful to be able to participate so much. It has just been so transformative already to have so many opportunities for participation in the Christian life. And it's still very new. We're still at the very, very beginning of our journey, but the people that we've met and the community that we get to participate in is so, so rich and so beautiful. And the relationships, again, we're just now forming those relationships, but even observing the other people who have been in this community, in this Orthodox life for much longer, you can see how intimate the bond is with everybody because of what they share and the consistency and structure to it. That's another thing that I've noticed, is that there is so much less politics, if that makes sense. There's not vying for position or playing like political or status oriented games. There's so much structure and stability in the church. It's not about charisma, it's steady, it's constant. And year after year, no matter where you are geographically or where you are in time, the Orthodox Church is and has been and will be the same. That is just a sense of security and stability and peace that is completely missing in the rest of the world, I would say, now more than ever. That's been my experience anyway. In the rest of life and in the secular world, things get to mean whatever you want them to mean. You can ascribe whatever meaning you want to whatever you do, and anything goes, and that is very destabilizing, honestly. It's something that was attractive to me when I was younger, not that I'm even that old, but it's exhausting to create an entire worldview from scratch. I personally am a very emotional person. If I'm basing my reality and my beliefs off of what I feel, that's going to be completely ever-changing, ever-shifting, and that has not been a positive experience for me in the seasons of my life where I have been doing that, where I've tried to parse together my own meaning for life and my own structure and my own sense of right and wrong and everything. So having structure in the Orthodox Church has been very grounding and very enriching to my life, and it really bleeds into everything, honestly, even the prayer life. So having that structure and being able to participate in that structure and the beauty of that structure has been so grounding and so lovely. And as I've said, we're just at the very beginning of our journey. So right now it's taking in all that we can, learning and growing, and also praying. That's something that's very new to me too. I've experienced a very dry, conservative Protestant prayer. I've experienced the kind of charismatic, non-denominational type of prayer. I've experienced New Age type of prayer, and Orthodox prayer is, again, so different. There's a little prayer book that I got at our church's bookstore that has pre-prescribed prayers that you can read, and I love them. They're so complete, they're so full. They cover everything, and I read many of the same prayers day after day after day, and I continue to get more out of them and understand more and be able to actually mean what I say more and more in those prayers. And that concept of fullness, I read a prayer and it's so complete. It checks every box of the things that I should be communicating with God about. It's just full, and that's kind of what the Orthodox Church is in every aspect. It's the fullness of the Christian faith, fullness of the Christian experience. And like I said, I will have those links in my description, but if this faith interests you at all, go to Google Maps, search Orthodox Church, find the one that's closest to you, and attend a service. Talk to their priest, schedule a meeting with him, and learn more. I mean, this is my experience. I hope that it can be helpful to other people, but there genuinely is no replacement for actually showing up and participating in it yourself. So with all that being said, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. There is plenty more where that came from and plenty more coming, and I'm very excited for all that I have in store here. All right, see you in the next one.